The genius behind Natasha Hausdorf. I'm so excited to get into this one. I am your Zionist prince, your white colonizer, tall the traveling clat. Let's get right into it.
Thank you very much for the invitation to appear before you, and I am very happy to have come all the way from the United Kingdom to participate in what has unfortunately become an extremely important topic to address.
By the way, guys, if you want to help me get to 500,000 subscribers and you like what I do, subscribe right now.
The fact that we are all here to discuss this heinous canard of genocide against the Jewish state is a very problematic thing. We meet, unfortunately, in serious and tragic times, but they are times that have been concretely contributed to by the weaponization of key concepts in international law, genocide included, unfortunately, by civil society as well as politicians and organizations like Amnesty International. The NGO Monitor, in responding to this outrageous false report put out in December, commented that Amnesty consistently uses false and manipulated claims as well as lawfare to shield Hamas and demonize Israel. And only in March 2022, Amnesty USA Director Paul O'Brien said at an event, "We are opposed to the idea, and this I think is an existential part of the debate, that Israel should be preserved as a state for the Jewish people." That has been at the core of the activity that we have seen for many, many years, from Amnesty International, Oxfam, who I believe is also represented in some capacity this evening, and many other NGOs that were set up with lofty ideals and ambitions to preserve international law and to fight injustice wherever it appears. These organizations are now at the core of spreading misinformation and blood libels against the Jewish state. And I want to pick up on just two aspects of what the first speaker commented on. The first was to ensure, she said, that law is applied equally to all parties. Well, this is something that, even in its report, Amnesty clearly does not hold to when it seeks to rewrite the definition of genocide, and I shall come back to that, I hope, in due course in my remarks. But the other comment that was made is that this report consisted of detailed investigations. And I just want to pick up on the methodology of this report, which is perhaps hidden in the small print of it, so that you understand how it is that Amnesty International communicates to us that it has collected this information. Amnesty International also spoke with members of local authorities in Gaza. Who are those local authorities? In other words, Amnesty International obtained information for its report from Hamas. It also indicated that it had received input from another Palestinian terrorist organization, the PFLP. It is quite shocking that this is what the report has been predicated on when one considers the prior reputation of Amnesty International. But when one looks at what this report is geared at, which is support for Hamas, those pieces very much appear to fall into place. Now, I would be here all afternoon/evening if I were to go through chapter and verse of the falsehoods that are contained in this report, but I appreciate our opening statements are time limited. So I will reserve myself simply to a few, including these conclusions that Amnesty International drew, that it did not find any evidence that any of the strikes were directed at military objectives, because that has been repeated to you this evening. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, international law does not work on the basis of the effects-based analysis that was suggested to you by the last speaker. Clearly, I'm afraid that demonstrates a lack of understanding about how international law as a whole, but international humanitarian law in particular, operates. It is not effects-based, it is intention-based. So unless Amnesty International, instead of taking their doctrine from Hamas, had access to the intelligence that Israel has operated on in each and every one of these strikes, it is in no position to make the assessments that it purports to make. Quite the contrary. And in fact, the entities with whom Israel has shared this information, sensitive intelligence that has informed Israel's proportionality analysis, which is critical to a proper application of international humanitarian law, those countries have consistently said They do not have concerns with breaches of international humanitarian law by Israel so far as proportionality and targeting is concerned. And with good reason, because the Israeli Defense Forces consistently go over and above the requirements of international law. And honest military experts and legal ones have been frank about that because of the practices that Israel has put into place. The proportionality analysis, the choice of munitions, the development of smart munitions, the targeting of buildings from particular angles to prevent fallout and collateral damage, the use of warnings, which institutes the precaution principle of IHL. Warnings, in fact, that this same report criticizes. You see, Israel is damned if it does and damned if it doesn't. On the one hand, it is accused of indiscriminately killing civilians, but on the other, when Israel seeks to evacuate those civilians, the allegation is that of forced displacement. It is ludicrous, ladies and gentlemen. But that is on the basis of the false representations about law more broadly. Let's deal with this blood libel of genocide, which comes off the back of the previous inversions of international legal terminology: occupation, ethnic cleansing, colonialism, apartheid. That was also subject to an entirely false report by Amnesty International. This concept of genocide is the most heinous of false allegations against the Jewish people. And undoubtedly, we have seen the consequences that these blood libels lead to. The execution of 2 Israeli staff members in DC. I do not say lightly that these organizations have blood on their hands promoting these falsehoods against the Jewish state. But why is the falsehood of genocide so heinous? Because this term was coined by Raphael Lemkin to provide legal terminology to the Jewish experience. The experience from the Holocaust of being targeted for extermination because they were Jews. That was unique in that period of time. Subsequently, of course, we have seen it again. The acts on the 7th of October, acts of genocide committed by Hamas with the intention of killing Jews. And that is the key element that Amnesty and others brush over when they seek to rewrite the law on the internationally defined crime of genocide. Because intention is critical to it. Intention to eradicate a group in whole or in part. That is the specific intent that is brushed over. This is a racial, ethnic, religious, or national group. And that intention, they argue now, can be otherwise implied. Doesn't need to be specific intent, where it is the only reasonable inference. That's the case law on the subject that was universally accepted until Amnesty tried to rewrite the law with this report. Why is it so important that this crime of crimes be focused so specifically on the intention to eradicate a group? Because it is so serious, because it is recognized as so heinous to seek to exterminate a people because of who they are. All of the evidence in this case, and the fact that we're even having this conversation is truly diabolical to me, but here we are. All of the evidence in this case points in totally the opposite direction. The aid that has been facilitated into the Gaza Strip, despite what you just heard, 25,200 aid trucks carrying 447,538 tons of aid, were facilitated into the Gaza Strip during the hostage release deal. That meant that there should have been 5 to 6 months of aid since the end of the ceasefire. You heard evidence put before you that people in Gaza were hungry. Where has that aid gone, ladies and gentlemen? Why are Amnesty International and other organizations not asking these important questions? Because if Hamas has been diverting this and preventing it from getting to the Palestinian civilians of Gaza, this is where their work should be done. Instead, in advancing this heinous blood libel of genocide against the Jewish people, they ignore the measures that Israel has taken to prevent civilian casualties. They ignore the aid that has been facilitated in, and instead they keep to their tried and tested method of seeking to delegitimize Israel at every opportunity and spread this false information. And yes, it has now become common parlance. It has, in the words of my counterpart on South African television just after the first provisional measures order, now it has finally become acceptable to use Israel and genocide in the same sentence. That is not a reflection of reality, that is not a reflection of the facts, that is a reflection of the heinous blood libels and how they have been filtered through the international legal order by organisations pursuing this agenda against Israel, and I'm glad for the opportunity this evening of finally being able to put to bed this obscene allegation and this serious misinformation.
Ooh, sorry about that clapping sound. I nearly broke my eardrum. So much to respond to here. I don't even know where to start. Okay, one, when it comes to the genocide claims, here's my quick hot take on it. If it's a genocide, fine. The way that she even brought it up, if that's the actual definition of genocide by the international community, wanting to eradicate in whole or in part a nationality, ethnicity, fine. You know what? You want to make the claim Palestinians are a nationality and we're trying to exterminate a portion of them in the Gaza Strip, even though our intention is so bad that their population has increased by some 60,000 individuals since the beginning of the war. But fine, if you want to claim that, then I need to see ICC reports, ICJ rulings of the genocide happening in Sudan, in Somalia, in Yemen, in Libya, in Lebanon, in Syria now. I need to see them now, because if Israel, I am fine to concede to you that there's a genocide happening in Gaza, but I need to see a genocide happening in all these places as well. It's not whataboutism, but to judge this as a genocide uniquely while seemingly genocides are happening all over this same genocide and we're not calling it out invalidates your point of a genocide here. If the same actions, or worse, by way larger numbers are happening in Syria and in Lebanon and in Yemen, just on the borders of the supposed genocide in Gaza, and we're not calling them a genocide, how can I quantify what's happening in Gaza as a genocide? Do you get what I'm saying? I am happy, and I don't believe there's a genocide happening, but I'm happy to concede that point to you if you're willing to say that all those other genocides are happening. But then my follow-up would be, why is there nothing being called out about those other genocides? Why is this genocide being looked at in a microscope when there's genocides far worse happening just around the corner? And again, it's not whataboutism, but I need to understand, where is the obsession with this genocide if nothing unique is happening in this genocide? There's so much to respond to. Natasha Hausdorf is a fucking genius. I love her. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye, class. If you believe in my content and want to support me, just know your help is needed. There's a bunch of great ways to support me, being PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, or joining my Patreon community down below. Patreon is the best way to support my channel, and you'll get a bunch of cool perks depending on what tier you join. Another great way to support me is by buying my merchandise on thetravelingclat.com. I regularly drop new merch designs like this beautiful hat, or this amazing shirt, where you can support the channel and get something cool for yourself. I also have an amazing Discord community with people from all over the world. Thank you so much for your support.